Hey folks, hello and welcome. I'm Chris Angel. My pronouns are they, them, and I will be the moderator for today's event. I'm an LGBTQ plus trainer, speaker, and consultant in Denver, Colorado. I also have a podcast called Allyship is a Verb and like 20 million other things I do for my business. So I'm also here to learn with y'all. And what we're going to do today is focus on LGBTQ plus small business owners. That includes folks who haven't started yet, side hustlers, wantrepreneurs, as Travers calls them, and we also welcome allies. So as you are joining us, please do share about your business in the comments and where you're located. You can also check out the other platform. So we're broadcasting today to YouTube and LinkedIn, but when we're done, go check out the other platform just to see who may have left some comments and if there's anyone you might be able to connect with. And then we're going to be saving some time for Q&A at the end. However, please ask your questions at any time so you don't forget, and I'll be keeping track of them in the chat. So our speaker today is Travers Johnson. He uses he, him pronouns. He's an award-winning content strategist and editor with 15 years of experience in digital media, digital marketing, and book publishing. He's the founder and CEO of Queerency, an LGBTQ plus business media startup, and also the creator of LGBTQ plus Business Week. It's an annual 7-day celebration of queer-owned small businesses in November. This will be the second year. It starts November 1st through the 7th. And most recently, he is a Forbes contributor who covers topics at the intersection of the queer and creator economy. He's worked for and with industry-leading companies including Mailchimp, Penguin Random House, and Scholastic. Also, he's just an awesome human all around. So I'm really happy to have him with us here today. So thank you so much, Travers. Anything you want to say before we get started?
Hey, y'all. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for co-hosting this with me, Chris Angel. It's been such a pleasure working with you and getting to know you over this past year. So I'm just excited to get started.
Heck yeah. So just so y'all know what to expect of today, and I'm seeing some of you starting to comment where you're from. Thank you for that. What I'll do is we're going to have Travers share a little bit more about his story, and then we're going to switch to more broadly talking about social media. We're going to acknowledge some accounts and what they're doing well. According to Travers, this is not my world. I have small followings. And then again, we'll have Q&A. So feel free to share what questions you have. And again, if you want to let us know what your business is, where you're tuning in from, we'd love to hear it. So just want to shout out to different kinds of businesses that are being represented today. We've got private practice therapy, DEI consulting, stationery shops. We've got dog walkers and pet sitters, content creators, all sorts of fun stuff. So this is really great. Happy to see that there's so many different folks tuning in. So thank you for that. Well, while folks are still writing in, Travers, I kicked us off with saying what Queerency is, but can you tell us more in your own words? What is Queerency? What was the vision for that and how it started?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, as you mentioned earlier in that great introduction, thank you, is in digital media and publishing. And for years, I've been really interested in the intersection of like business media and minority media. And as a Black person, I could always see myself represented in legacy publications like Black Enterprise and newer ones like Afrotech. As a cisgender man, I can see myself represented in every mainstream business publication. But as a queer person, I never really saw any consistent representation or representation that covered queer entrepreneurship and business accomplishments with the dignity and the depth that it deserves. And, I was always pleasantly surprised, but surprised nonetheless, when I would learn things like the founder of SiriusXM Radio is a trans woman, or that PayPal and Facebook have queer co-founders, or that a Black gay millionaire helped fund the civil rights movement, right? And so I got to thinking that if someone like me, who has like a very strong interest in business news, does not know about this, I'm sure that people who don't share that same obsessive interest in business media that are queer don't know this as well. And it made me think about the sort of artificial ceilings that may cause us to put on ourselves as out queer people. And so the day after the Boss Talk US Supreme Court ruling in June 2020, I launched Queerency, at first on Instagram, and then it's just been growing ever since.
Yeah. And so I'm seeing someone in the chat wrote about how they haven't started up yet because they're terrified of all the tech. And I'm thinking there are so many social media platforms now, and there can be a lot of noise saying, sign up for this one, sign up for that one. And you intentionally started with Instagram. Why did you select that as your first platform?
Honestly, because it was the one that I was the most native to. Out of all the platforms, I spent the most time personally on Instagram. And so it was just an easier lift for me to just create an email address and go start something on Instagram, a platform that I was already familiar with. And I think that that's a great sort of lesson for most people. Like, you should start where you are the most native, where you're the most comfortable, because that way you'll be able to gain a level of confidence, and you'll already have a lay of the land. Like, I already knew what type of content worked on Instagram, what didn't. I had some like a vague idea of like the sort of things that I could do to grow my following on Instagram. And so that's really why I started there. But of course, I wanted to look at other platforms as well. And I tried those out, and we can talk about that as well.
That lends us nicely into the next question I have for you is, sometimes we try things and we give it, a good try, but it's just not maybe coming naturally to us, or it's causing us more grief than success. And, it's just maybe not a good fit. So what happened when you tried Twitter?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, to put it bluntly, it failed. Okay.
And that's okay. And that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's what happened, and that's perfectly fine. It wasn't really much a failure. It was just a lesson, right? It was experimentation. And so when I launched Instagram, launched Queerency, I launched on Instagram first. But I knew that it was important to have representation on all of the platforms. So I created a Facebook, a Twitter, a Snapchat even. And I really, for about a few months, I tried to make Twitter work for the Queerency brand. But what I realized is that, like, I'm just not a great tweeter, right? Like, I'm better at like longer form writing. I'm better at like public speaking. But when it comes to like quick, pithy sort of tweet content, that's just not where my talent lies. And so what I realized is that I could keep the Twitter account and have it as just a destination for people who are active on there. And then just like in the bio, drive them to my Instagram and eventually to my TikTok, which is where I really start to get a lot of traction.
So I'm hearing there's value in taking up digital real estate, so that if you've landed on a handle, for example, try to get that very same one across the board. You don't need to
Yes.
decide on a platform yet, but if you know that you're going to do this, try to grab it anywhere you can. And then that way you have it. And then also when you're thinking about marketing later, right? And you can just simply say, follow me at LGBTQ Business Week,
Mhm.
anywhere you're active, or whatever's going to be the thing for you. And it's a little bit easier. Because I noticed when I was looking at your different handles on different platforms, on one of them, you weren't able to get the full LGBTQ Business Week.
Right.
But you still found a way to make it close enough so people knew it was you.
Right.
So you dropped Twitter, that's fine. And then you joined TikTok. What made it easier to join that platform?
Well, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy decision. I actually went kicking and screaming because I was not at all interested. This was like 2020 when I made the decision I was going to do it. And then it wasn't until 2021 that I actually, was it 2021? No, it was 2022 actually that I started on TikTok. Sorry. So it's 2021 where I realized that I needed to get on TikTok. And the reason for that was because I started to notice my Instagram growth hitting a plateau. And that was because Instagram's algorithm had switched to prioritizing video and reels as opposed to photos and sort of text-based content. And so I knew that, like, if I wanted to grow or even just to maintain the platform that I was building as a top of funnel platform on Instagram, I had to start doing video. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do Instagram reels, I might as well try TikTok. You know, all these kids are doing TikTok, they're doing skits and they're doing dances and stuff. So maybe there's a place for me there. And I'm so glad that I made that decision and was urged to make that decision by a friend, because that really propelled my growth over the last year in a way that I had not had prior to that. And TikTok became the tide that lifted all of my boats, not just on Instagram, but my email list and my other platforms as well. So it wasn't something that I was very interested in doing, but I did it out of necessity, and that made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you put me in my place, because, yeah, I guess what I was thinking is, as far as the ease, we think about if we're just one person, which is amazing, and I don't
Yeah.
want to dismiss that. And if we are one person, how do we prioritize the work? There's like endless to-do lists, especially if we're an entrepreneur, and side hustlers, etc. So to me, it felt like an easy transition for you in that, yes, it's a new platform. And because you'd already had some experience and success with Instagram, you were able to repurpose that content for
Mm.
TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
working smart, because we can't copy paste, exactly what we're doing on Instagram and post it to TikTok. We can't, exactly do that with Twitter, right? You kind of have to write to the platform, but you can still repurpose it in a way that you're honoring the platform it's going to be on. So, um, I feel like you're being really successful in social media, because just bragging about the numbers, you went from 0 to present day over 12,000 followers on Instagram, and you got from 0 to over 50,000 people following you on TikTok. What do you feel like helped get to those numbers, and how long did that take for
Mm.
you?
Yeah. Well, you hit on a really great part of the answer to that, which is like using one platform as sort of the foundation from which all of the other content for the other platforms can be pulled from, right? And so, what I quickly found with TikTok was that TikTok could be my primary platform, meaning I create all of my video content on TikTok first and then repurpose it for Instagram, or use the scripts that I wrote for the TikTok videos to create an article for my website or my newsletter. And so, by starting with TikTok, that helped me create content, repurpose content for Instagram and for my other platforms. And I think that that was one of the things that led to my success there, was that I wasn't sort of reinventing the wheel. And to your point, a lot of that sort of evergreen content that I've been building on Instagram for almost 2 years prior to joining TikTok, I could just repurpose and refresh on TikTok. So a lot of the stuff about the historical pieces, the sort of evergreen content about personal finance, things like that, I just took that from Instagram, where it was just a dull, static carousel photo or
Mhm.
something, and brought it to life on TikTok in a way that resonated with that platform. So I think that's one of the lessons, is to, like you said, work smarter, not harder. Find the platform that where you can sort of build a foundation, and then use that to fuel your content and your growth elsewhere.
Love it. Taking a look at the chat over on LinkedIn in particular, it looks like Paul discovered you on TikTok and was glad that you traveled over there. So way to go, Travers.
Hey, Paul. I'm glad you did too.
An important piece to also deciding which platforms to go to are like knowing who you're even trying to market to, right?
Yes.
So some people may call that like a persona.
Yeah.
And you use three in particular. Can you talk us through what in the world is a persona? Why is it important to do that work and how you landed on the ones that you have?
Absolutely. Yeah. So personas are like things that they tell you in like all the startup literature and marketing about how to think about your target audience or your target customer. And, it really behooves you to go as granular and in depth as you can think of, like even give them a name, right? Like, and so the way I think of my audiences on different platforms is there are entrepreneurs. Those are people who have already launched a business, whether it's a one-person solo co-founder business or a 100-person business. There are wantrepreneurs, and those are people who are side hustlers. They may have a traditional 9-to-5 job, but they have a side hustle, or they have an idea for a side hustle that they would like to eventually turn into a business. And then there are just like advocates or supporters. So people who just love their queerness, love the support of the queer people, love to support queer businesses, and also allies as well. And so when I was thinking about those three personas for Queerency, I realized that each one of those, there was a larger population on the different platforms. So there's a larger population of the actual entrepreneurs on my Instagram, right? So that's the community that I've been cultivating from literally day one. These are a lot of people that, have businesses. Some have started them and transitioned out of them and restarted a new one. But a lot of my core following on Instagram are people with businesses. On TikTok, I found there are a lot of entrepreneurs and supporters, right? So you'll have people that have an idea for business and just want to learn more about how to launch it. But I would say that's only about a third of my audience on TikTok. The rest are just supporters, right? So people who want to hear about the latest news in queerness, the people who want to support queer-owned businesses, and also allies who just want to be abreast of how to be in allyship with us. And so that was one of the things I learned about how to focus a persona or on a platform. And then the third is like I relaunched my newsletter on my website called The Balance Sheet. And that sort of that's another platform, right? And that new platform is really focused on the entrepreneurs and the wantrepreneurs, right? And so what I'm finding is like there are fewer people in that email list that are just there for support. These are people that really want more specific information and inspiration about owning a business and keeping it going.
For those of y'all watching, and thank you again for tuning in, I'm thinking about, I'm primarily on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I know I get really upset when I'm not seeing content from the creators, from the accounts that I'm following. Sometimes I have to make an effort to go to their pages just to see, did I miss something? Like I always love seeing your updates, especially with your upbeat, positive attitude. And, it's just something I gravitate toward. And so, I love what you said about email, because I know we can think of email as like an older technology, but the reason why it's so important for us to still have an email newsletter is because people do want to hear from us, especially the super fans. And the problem is with the algorithms, you're talking about, well, I had to pivot to reels from carousels, and now Instagram is all of a sudden saying, okay, well, now we're going back to like carousels. It's like, which is it, right? Like, pick one. And so what an unfortunate reality is of being in the business world and having social media accounts is at any point we can be hacked or lose our account for any reason. And there's not like a number we can just like call Instagram and be like, hi, can I have my account back? It is a pain. Sometimes people even have backup accounts. And so what we realize is it's so important for us to own our data. So when we have that email newsletter, regardless of what we're in, if we're an Etsy shop, I saw someone has an Etsy shop. I saw, let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, we've got a do-it-yourself design party in LA. So regardless of what your business is, this allows you to own your data. So whether you use Mailchimp, any of those other platforms, you have direct access to emailing your super fans. Because again, at any point, our social media could be taken away. I guess, yeah,
Yeah.
was there anything else you wanted to say to that?
Well, like, yeah, quite literally, like with TikTok, I've grown in 1 year 50,000 followers, and then now TikTok could literally be banned in the United States, right? So that's why it's so important to, as much as you can, drive your audience to the platforms that you actually own, right? Like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all the social media platforms, those are rented. That's rented social media real estate. We are not entitled to be there, and it's not even rented because it's free. Like we don't pay anything to be there. So that could be snatched from us like in a TikTok apocalyptic type of way, or it could just be like the algorithm changes and it turns out that like your followers aren't finding your content anymore. You could be shadow banned. You could be blocked. You could be hacked, all of these things. And so the more you can sort of think of social media and these other platforms as the entryway for your audience to really drive them down to your website or your podcast or your newsletter, the things that you actually sort of have more control over, the better.
Absolutely. So thinking about numbers, I know that I'll speak for myself. I can get caught up in numbers sometimes, like how many people just listened to my latest episode of my podcast, or how many people opened my last email from this month. And I'm curious for you, when it comes to number of followers and number of likes on a particular post, which do you think is more important to follow?
I think followers is more important because likes don't necessarily indicate whether or not you are really building community, right? Particularly on a platform like TikTok, where someone can go viral overnight and have 1 million views and 1 million likes, but then you look on their profile and they have 1,000 followers, right? And so to me, followers are more important, and you don't have to have a lot of followers, right? So I think that that's something that I've learned in my journey, is that like it took me 2 years to surpass 10,000 followers on Instagram, right? So it wasn't an overnight success for me on Instagram. I'm still, I'm at 12,000 followers now. That's still not a lot of followers, but
Listen, I don't even have 3,000, so
yeah, but
yeah.
you have an engaged audience, right?
Yeah.
And well before I hit 10,000, I also had an engaged audience. And that's where the value is, right? Like it doesn't matter how many people I have if they don't feel like they're a part of a community, if they don't feel seen and heard. And so there are lots of ways that you can do that with 200 followers or 2,000 followers or 200,000 followers, right? So it's not really about the quantity, but about the quality of your engagement. And that can be like, I scored a 5-figure brand partnership that'll be launching next month with like last year, right? Like, so, and I think at the time I only had 5,000 followers, right? But they could see that like of those 5,000 followers, people were engaged, people were liking, people were converting to my website to join my email list and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that like followers is generally more important, but more importantly than the number of followers, it's like the quality of them.
Yeah. And something that I was thinking about as you were sharing that too is the engagement goes both ways. So, a good example I have of that is I noticed when we had the most recent post that you had put on Instagram and tagged me in, you also, when people commented back. And
Yeah.
anytime I've shared your content, whether it was something we were doing together or not, I've noticed that like I hear from you. There's some sort of
Mm,
acknowledgement that you appreciate that I've shared and amplified your message.
yeah.
Again, whether it's because you're talking about queer history in some way, or again, spreading some like good news to help combat a lot of the ugly noise that we can have right now. How long does it take you to do those engagements, and why do you feel like that's important for you? Like, what led you to making sure that you were doing that with folks?
Mm. I mean, truthfully, it just like I just felt really grateful for people to be sharing my content. So whenever once I learned, I didn't realize it at first, but once I learned that like you could view the reshares of your content in people's stories that are public, I was like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity to like see my reach and to like thank the people for doing so, right? And now Instagram has the option to just like it, right? And so I think that's really important because people don't have to, right? I'm not entitled to people's attention or their engagement. And when they do lend me part of their day and then decide to amplify my content to their networks, I'm truly grateful for that. And so that's how it started. But to your point, I then realized that like that's actually how you build community on your platform, right? So like I want it to be a conversation as opposed to just like this sort of one way top down sort of thing. And I would think about some of the platform or the creators or brands that I've interacted with and like, you know, that I didn't receive that back and like sort of, I understand that people are busy or whatever. So there is no harm, no foul. But when people did reply and when the people did acknowledge me, that really made a big difference. To your question about how long it takes a lot of time, right? Like, and especially on top of all of the other responsibilities. And so, you're gonna miss some messages, you're gonna miss some comments, unfortunately. But I think that like you maybe not strive for perfection in that regard, but strive to just do your best every time. And I think overall it'll pay off. So yeah, like that's one of the things that I really think helped me build a true community around Queerency in the early days, well before I hit 10,000 or anything like that, was because I was actually talking and communing with the people who were following me on the different platforms.
Yeah, and I'm a huge proponent of boundaries, so I don't think we're suggesting that folks, as you're trying to drift off to sleep at night, stay up as long as you can responding to people and liking the reshares and everything they're doing for you. But maybe you spend what, like 10 to 15 minutes a day, depending on
Sure.
how much you're getting. Just
Yeah.
like that time is carved out for that, and you can be like, cool, took care of that for today, and then you can reset again the next day. When I'm creating a post And you mentioned about the personas, and when we talked about that a little bit, this is like one of the best times that they come into play because I'm thinking about talking to that person directly. I imagine I'm having a conversation with them. So how would I talk to that person, right? And then that also brings us into niches. Like for
Mhm.
myself as an LGBTQ plus speaker, trainer, and consultant, it's really easy for me to say I work with corporations and nonprofits, right?
Mm,
And I'm thinking casting a wide net is going to help me to land more clients, but not necessarily,
yeah,
because talking to a corporation and talking to a nonprofit are different. There's also
yeah,
different price points. And
yeah,
so the more we can niche down. So if I say, "Oh, I'm a consultant who works with tech startups and helping them, you know, gain like attract and gain LGBTQ plus employees and treat them well, then it's going to be easier for a potential client to see me and be like, yes, we need to hire this person. And what's interesting is like I think there's this catch 22 that can happen is we think when we niche we're turning people away, but it actually helps us to just clear again who we're talking to and who we're a good fit for. So yeah, I guess anything you want to say to that, and also like how can people think about finding their niche if they're not sure who that is?
Oh, there's so much to unpack there. That's a webinar in and of itself, honestly.
Yeah.
So I'll try to keep it short. For me, like I believe in like collaboration, not competition with like people within my community. And what I realized is that like I like to find a lane in which I can contribute, right? And where the lane in which I could contribute was queer business news, right? There are some fantastic legacy publications from Out Magazine to The Advocate to what, pick one to like even like smaller, not smaller, but more local publications like Q Voice News, who I believe is on today. They're a local LGBTQ publication for the San Francisco Bay Area. And so everyone has their role to play. And the role that I wanted to contribute was focusing on queer entrepreneurship and business. And I think by staying in my lane, it, to your point, attracts people, the sort of early adopters. But then what happens there after that is it starts to like organically shift, like grow outward, right? And so as I mentioned earlier, when I first started on Instagram, it was just like straight entrepreneurs, right? So people from candle companies to, like sex therapist, right? But then over the months and years, it would start to be people who were wantrepreneurs and side hustlers. And now it's like a lot of people who are allies and supporters. And I think that why the sort of outer layer people are attracted is because they see the sort of focus and passion that the people in that like early adopter, hyper focused entrepreneur set have. And that is like people are interested in people who are interested in what they're doing, who are passionate about what they're doing. And so when you're niching down, people can tell whether or not like it's authentic, whether you really care about what you're doing, and whether you really know what you're talking about, and whether that's something that is a top priority for an audience member or not. They can appreciate the passion. One of my favorite TikTok accounts is this woman who is a makeup artist. And I told her one time, I was like, I have no interest in makeup, but I do love watching you and listening to you talk about makeup, right? And so I think that that's a good example of how finding your niche, finding your lane, staying true to that will not only attract the people who are the perfect fit, but also people who are just there to support what you're doing because they see the light that lights up in your eyes when you're talking about it.
Yeah, and what this is reminding me of when we're talking about niching down, it's kind of like the social media platforms too. You're picking
Mm,
one to start, especially so you don't overwhelm yourself. And then as you have that person really clear, again, we kind of want to give them a face, a name, etc. Do they like to take walks in the morning or not? Get as specific as you can. But yeah, once you feel like you've really gotten that voice down and you know who that person is and you know how to talk to them, when time and capacity allows, then you can start adding like persona number two or
yeah,
niche number two.
yeah,
And then you just can work on that slow build.
yep.
So I love that. When we talked about engaging with content and it also being a two-way street as much as possible, again with boundaries especially, so we're not doing that for like 3 hours in our bed and then not sleeping. um how do we encourage people to engage with my content? Like, let's say I'm an artist, I have a big following, and I launch a store and I want to make sure that people are going there and buying my stuff. Like, yeah, how do I get people to engage with my content and then go do a call to action like that?
I think the first thing is that you should not always be selling to your audience, right? And so one thing that I see with a lot of like e-commerce or product-based businesses is like every post is like buy this, sign up for this, whatever, and that becomes fatiguing to the audience. But it also sort of like creates a minor resentment because people want to know your why and your purpose beyond just capitalism or beyond just sign up for my newsletter, right? And so I think that the people that I see doing it the best, like if out of every 5 posts, only one of them has a very direct call to action about buy this, sign up for this, register for this, or whatever. The others sort of focus on, the why. They sort of focus on the purpose. They focus on the personality of the owner or the creator. And I think those are really good strategies because it helps people are more likely to support you if they like you, if they trust you, if they think that you're not if you're they know that you're in it for more than just their money or their attention, right? And so I think that, I'm not an e-commerce brand or a product-based brand or anything like that, but if I were, I would definitely focus my content primarily on, things around why I'm doing what I'm doing, what I'm passionate about, providing a service to the audience, right? Doing things that can help them and inform them. So if you're a product-based business, do tutorials, do things like that that can really be beneficial to the audience, and then ask them for whatever it is that you want from them, right? Whether it's to buy your candle, whether it's to purchase your art, whether it's to sign up for your webinar.
Yeah. So we're collaborating, right? Because we didn't know each other previously. I forget who slid in whose DMs first. Maybe it was me sliding into yours. I don't know.
I can't
So
remember
thank
either.
you. Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can go look. But regardless of if if I have an Etsy shop, which I do, or whatever field I'm in, I'm thinking about, I'm trying to choose a lane and stick in it, but I'm thinking like on LinkedIn right now, I've been having a lot of people reach out to me. And sometimes they have a very clear ask and they say, hey, I'm looking for a job in this particular field. For some reason, I think you can help me. Right. And those don't feel great because although I do want to help community, kind of part of it also is like, what's in it for me? Because I'm
Mm,
giving you time and I have so little free time. There's things I have to say no to personally.
mhm.
So when thinking about collaborating with someone else, what is a good organic way that we can start those conversations? And how do we know when it's a good fit to collaborate with someone?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the last part of that question first. I think a lot of it just has to do with like mutual affection in a way. Like I can't remember who slid into whose DM first between us, but when it happened, it was like, oh my God, I love your content. I love the work that you're doing. I really, of course, let's collaborate, right? Just yesterday, someone that I was following, had been following for months on TikTok, followed me back because they saw one of my videos. And I reached out to her. I was like, I love your work. I love your content. Keep up the great work. And she replies back and said, I love yours too. We should collab, right? And so I think that like the way that you know that you should collaborate with someone is if like there's like a mutual sort of affection there or appreciation, respect for the work, for the person, even if you don't actually know them. Remind me of the first part of your question though, because I did forget that.
Yeah, just like, should we be connecting with other collaborators and how
Mhm.
do we do that in an organic way? And I to kick us off while you're thinking about that, when I'm asking people to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm not thinking about what can this person do for me. My message is, hey, I would love to connect with you. I really appreciate your work. If you have time in the near future, I would love to have a chat and see how we might be able to support each other's work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think that's a really wonderful approach. That's the approach that I think that we had as well. And I think another, approach is like offering some sort of service or way to help the person, right? Like I'll never forget last Pride Month, someone slid in my DMs. I was working on a project for Queerency, and they're like, "Hey, like I saw this project you're doing. I have some ways I think that you can improve it, right?" And like they literally designed this spreadsheet for me for no cost or anything. And they were like, "No." I was like, "How can I pay you?" They're like, "No." It literally took me 3 minutes to do, but like it was so helpful to me, but more so it just like really was meaningful to me that they like led with like trying to help me in some way, in a genuine way. And so like that can't always be the case, but I do think that like when you are reaching out to someone, it should have a sense of purpose to it. You may not know how you can collaborate immediately, but you should know that like you should have a sense that like this is someone that I would want to work with. And I think that like what we're doing is in alignment, even though the specifics of how we could collaborate may not be clear yet.
Yeah, I'm thinking, of course, many of us would probably love to be. You were talking about Advocate and all these different publications, especially, queer focused publications. Of course, I'd love to have them, amplify my podcast, for example. And I think if we are going to do something like that, because I see that as a collaboration, I want to make that ask so easy for them because I'd want to say, hey, you know what? For example, my podcast is called Allyship is a Verb. Trans Day of Visibility is on the 31st of March. Don't be doing this stuff last minute, by the way, folks. Like
Yeah.
this would have been good to do like last month or even the month before. I could say, hey, you know what? I just got a bunch of attention because I got two nominations for the Ambies, which is like the Oscars of podcasting. I didn't win it, but I'm wondering if you might, consider amplifying my voice. I'm trans, etc. But like then also connecting with them and seeing how you can amplify and support their work too. But we want to make those asks as easy as possible. I guess, is there anything else you'd want to share around that before we dive into some examples and start answering questions?
Totally. Yeah. Like the only thing I want to add to that is like um network laterally, not always up and down, right? Because I think the mistake that a lot of people make is always trying to get the attention of the, the established people, the big guys, the people with a million followers, right? And then they ignore the people who are on their level. And those people that are on their level will be the big ones soon enough, right? Before you know it. And so a lot of the best connections that I've made through Queerency over the past 2 years have been people who were in the struggle with me, right? Like similar amount of followers, similar missions. None of us were like had major platforms or anything like that, but we worked together and we sort of lifted each other up as we were climbing. And that was a way, and that was like a better way to do it than for me to like always try to get the sort of attention of the New York, or not the New York Times, but like a major publication or something like that. And then also, I do think it's important to, like, when you are, networking laterally, like, or sorry, this is one other thing. Like, I've had people repost my content that have 2 million followers, and I've had people repost my content that have 30,000 followers. And it's the people with 30,000 followers that have contributed to the most growth on my platform than the people with 2 million. And what I realize is that those smaller, more niche types of pages have a deeper connection with their audience. And so when they say you need to follow Queerency, I love what they're doing, I'm going to get, literally 1,000 new followers in a day, right? Whereas an account that may have 2 million followers and they repost my stuff, I'll still get a lot, but not as many as the one with just a fraction of their followers. And so I think that in itself is a lesson that, like, bigger is not always better. And when you focus on networking and connecting with people that are closer to where you are, you can sort of pull each other up in a way that may be more beneficial than if you had gotten, the 2 million follower person to mention your page.
Yeah, and I'm seeing Miss Brown on LinkedIn said that, yes, network laterally. Your partners are next to you, in front and behind you, and that short-term collabs with lateral peers will eventually yield extraordinary impact. So it's good to see that people are already thinking about that and seeing success with that. So I definitely want to make sure we have time for questions, but I do want to quickly show some examples we pulled of. So this is going back to a previous thread of when we talked about repurposing content. Mm-hmm. So we're going to show some examples of that. Travers, you want to walk us through this one?
Yeah. So I pulled some sort of quick case studies. This is one of my favorite creators, Daniela Flores of I Like to Dabble. And they, over the last year, they've blown up on Instagram. They went from like 10,000 followers to now almost 100,000 followers in 1 year. But prior to that, they were much bigger. Pinterest was their major platform. And so what I've observed them doing is taking their Pinterest content, using that as the foundation, and then repurposing it for Instagram. And so they have 70,000 followers essentially on Pinterest here, and they've had that for a while, but then they used it over at Instagram last year, and you've really seen them blossom. If you want to go to the Frugal Gay, that's another great example. So actually go to the next slide, the Twitter. So this same tweet, like his primary or foundational platform is Twitter. He has, I think, almost 50,000 followers on Twitter, and he does a lot of really great threads. But then what he does is takes that, either literally screenshots it or repurposes it in a way for Instagram for this one. And, he is not reinventing the wheel. and he's using content that worked elsewhere on another platform where he has a smaller following, but it still makes an impact. And then the last one that I wanted to
I
share,
want to, if
yeah,
I could just quickly jump in, the other thing I want to say is I know that this may be more visually appealing for some folks, especially since it's on Twitter. And some folks may think, well, this looks ugly in comparison to how it looks on Twitter. But here's the thing is that we don't have to worry about our posts being super beautiful, because if the content and value are there, that's the most important. And that's why this still did well on Instagram. So I did
that's
want to just pop in and say that really quickly.
that's exactly right. Yeah, 100%. Because this is literally just a screenshot, right? There's no, Adobe design aspects with this, right? But like, this is also one of his highest engaged posts that I can see on Instagram. And so it's because of the value that he provides. And that's the most important thing.
Yes.
And then the other two that I want to mention are Bad Queers and the Queer Money podcast. Now, we've talked a lot about platforms being social media, but another platform that you are an expert at is podcasting, right? Like that is a platform in itself. And so what I see creators like the Bad Queers or the Debt Free Guys with Queer Money podcast do, this is what the Bad Queers is a good example. This is them just recording their podcast, but they started videotaping it and taking those recordings, snippets of those recordings, putting them on Instagram and TikTok. And that's sort of using the podcast as the foundation to lift all the boats of Instagram and TikTok. And you see the same thing with the Queer Money podcast, where they start with their podcast, then they started taping their podcast episodes, and you'll see a lot of their content either literally verbatim from the podcast on their Instagram, or repurposed and refreshed for Instagram. So I think those are some good qualities and good strategies to use when you're thinking about picking a platform to start with and then building from there.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look. We have so many comments on LinkedIn. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. And I appreciate the folks on YouTube as well. So just trying to take a look here at some of the questions that have come in. Again, so many different people from so many different parts of the world have been tuning in. So thank you for that. And it looks like folks have been making connections too, which is awesome. Someone wants to know, and this is something I can struggle with as well. How do we market without annoying people? Because there's nothing I hate more than unsolicited emails and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's hard, but I think the biggest, it should always start with like providing value, right? So don't think about marketing, think about providing value. And value can be informing people, value can be inspiring people, value can be entertaining people. Or it could be providing a solution to a problem that they have. And so, I think that when you're thinking about your content strategy, if you think of it less about marketing and like try to figure out what does my audience need, what inspires them, what can I do to inform them or entertain them, I think that's a good way to sort of structure your content so that it's focused more on the value add as opposed to just like marketing a product, marketing a service.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone had a follow-up question for you. They wanted to know if you consider yourself to be a news publication.
Yeah, I do. I do. But more so like a creator social first publication. So like I'm not Forbes, I'm not Fast Company yet. But the goal is to be that one day for our community. But and we're starting in a social era, and I had to start Queerency where the audience already was, and the audience was on Instagram and on TikTok. And so that's a good lesson for whatever type of brand you're building, is to start where the people are and meet them there, as opposed to like going where you want to start and then trying to get them to come over there. Like in a perfect world, Queerency would have been like launched as like a website like the Huffington Post, and everyone would have found me there. But that's not the way it works. Like you have to go to Instagram and these other social platforms where people are actually gathering, and then invite them to your website and invite them to your newsletter.
I love it. Something that Paul had mentioned was that as a queer human, there is always the danger of trolls working to take one down. I think referencing like back to the conversation, the thread we had of losing our social media accounts because of hackers, because I don't know, we get locked out, whatever that looks like. But yeah, that sometimes people will report us in our content just because we're queer and they don't like it. And that's, I think, one of the things I appreciate about Instagram is that, especially in comparison to Twitter, there are some more tools to protect our peace. And what I mean by that is like and this is why it's helpful when we're on platforms, maybe once a month, go and see if there's a new feature that's rolled out that may be helpful to you. So as soon as I could toggle on the option that only people who follow me can comment on my posts, that helps reduce the trolls. Because yes, there's going to be those people who are going to go and follow you just so they can, do this and then leave. But it's like another barrier, right? It's like another like step they would have to take. And it's helped a lot. And there's also filters. There's word filters I can put in. So if someone says this word, that word, it's not allowed as a comment on my page. Did you want to say anything else to that?
Absolutely. No, use the tools that are available to protect yourself. And like for me, one of those tools is just the block button, right? Like whenever I see a troll or even someone who is clearly acting in bad faith, right? Like I just block them, not because I don't, I'm scared of them or that what they said is just so egregious. But like I found that like to protect my peace and like, I'm doing us both a favor, right? Neither one of us is going to change each other's mind. And we could both be spending our time better than engaging with complete strangers and anonymous strangers many ways in many times on the internet. And so I always encourage people, whether they're queer or any sort of marginalized group, don't feel bad about blocking people who are trolling you or who are just sort of like engaging with you in bad faith. It's not worth the headache, and you'll be saving yourself time and ultimately the trolls some time as well. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and then places like Twitter, unfortunately, again, because they don't have a lot of as many resources on there. Sometimes when people are getting an onslaught of folks trolling, the best thing they can do is make their account private for a while. And then, hopefully everything's okay after a week or so. This question coming in, do you have suggestions for maybe translating followers from personal accounts to business accounts? Like how might one go about that?
That's a really wonderful question. Well, so like I've noticed that some people, like, for example, I like to dabble that I mentioned earlier. Like if I'm not incorrect, their Instagram page was originally a personal page. And at some point they just decided to blend the brand with the personal page and just started growing it from there. And so like I think that if you have a personal page, on a social media platform or like a newsletter or a blog or something like that, you can sort of reach out to your followers or your community there and say, hey, I'm thinking about pivoting this to something else. I'd love your permission to send you an email based off of this new content, give them a way to opt in or opt out, always let them know. But what you'll find is that like a lot of people will stick around for the new content because they like you and they like what you've already built.
Yeah. I know we're at time. We have a few more questions. Should we wrap things up?
I'm happy to answer any more questions that people
Cool.
have.
All right. Um, so someone is asking, my question is how to connect authentically on LinkedIn. I want to learn how to have engaging fun on this platform. It feels quiet and serious here.
Yeah. I am not, that's not my area of expertise. You might have a better answer for that, Chris Angel.
I think it's okay to be different. In offline conversations, Travers and I have had, one of the things that I know he's mentioned is that rather than following just all of the trends that are coming through of like the latest dance, the latest audio clip, etc., we gravitate toward things that stand out to us. So, for example, I don't always necessarily follow a bunch of different drag queens. Drag performers are awesome, but the ones I love the most are Patty Gonia, because she talks a lot about saving the planet and what we can do to better protect it. And even though I cannot handle math, which is terrible as a business person, even though I can't do that very well, I believe the name is Online with Kine, really great drag queen who talks a lot about like different super complex math problems and stuff. But like you said with the makeup thing earlier, not always my jam, but I love that they've carved out those niches for themselves and that they're so different. So, you know what? Honestly, as a person who does browse a lot on LinkedIn, I welcome more fun content. If there's more fun ways that we can have polls that are just utter nonsense, not all the time, but if we can like find ways to work that in and stuff and help build that community, I'm all for it. So I wouldn't consider myself to be a LinkedIn expert, but I don't think it's a bad thing to do that, because to me it's like that water cooler talk, and I think that is appropriate, right? Those in
Mm.
between moments. So I don't know. What do you think to that?
I love that. That's such a great idea because basically what you're doing is like finding your lane, finding your niche, and creating value that's not there on the platform currently, right? So if everyone's telling their latest business wins or talking about the latest, business news topic, and you want to start doing that too, you're just going to get lost in the conversation, right? It's like trying to be heard in a room where everyone's shouting. But if you start doing something, you know that's more fun or lighthearted or fits a more specific niche, you may find that it's your voice will be louder because you'll be in a room by yourself or in a room where just a few other people are having normal conversations as opposed to a concert of people shouting. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I encourage you to go for it. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Do what you think. Be the content, be the contribution to the platform that you want to see.
Yeah, because not to belabor the point, but just as a kind of side quest here for my fellow neurodivergent folks, when I go hiking, the two most memorable people I've ever seen were at the same place, and I would see them regularly. One was like the tallest human ever with the smallest dog ever. And that stands out to me because, like, I'd never seen that combination before when going hiking. And the other person that I remember very vividly is this person who would, I don't know how to describe it other than dancing and hiking at the same time, and like did that the whole time. But those people stand out to me, and I always looked forward to seeing them on my hike because it just brought me joy, honestly.
Yeah,
And it was different from what anyone else was doing. So
yeah,
again,
yeah.
I think it's worth it. Um, what specific steps did you implement to grow your Instagram and TikTok audiences? And do you spend money on acquiring them?
To answer the second part of the question, no, it's been completely organic thus far. I said, especially on Instagram, I said I wasn't going to pay for ads until I got to 10,000. And so I still haven't paid for any ads or anything like that, but I'm actually looking into it just to see how it could work, because just like I didn't think that TikTok was going to work for me, and it did, ads could be a great boost for me as well. But for the strategies that I used, I think the first is that, not to belabor the point about finding your niche, but like the reason that I had such quick growth on TikTok is because I was entering a room by myself, and so my voice could be the loudest in the room, right? If I had gone onto TikTok to do dances and to do skits, that only would have been inauthentic, and it wouldn't have worked out for me. But like I would have gotten lost amongst the hundreds of thousands of other people doing the same thing. So and Instagram is similar. Like there aren't many people talking about the things that I talk about on Instagram. And so I think that was the key strategy, is like finding my niche and then niching down even further than that, and just talking about the things, providing the content and the value that's different from what everyone else is talking about. I think the second thing would be to like, again, this is a webinar in and of itself too. But I think another strategy that I've used on both TikTok and Instagram is just sort of like speaking to the audience as if they're one person, right? And so like I say a lot of yous, I say a lot instead of y'all, right? Instead of you all or all of you, right?
That's hard for you as a Texan.
It's very hard as a Texan, yeah. So like I try to speak to as if I'm speaking to one person, and I try to speak as if I'm having a conversation with that person. And the other thing is that like one trick that I'll give away, but like I think everyone should do, is introduce yourself, right? Like if you're doing video, even if you're not doing video, even if you're just like doing comfortable only doing text or whatever content, do a post where you say, have a photo of yourself and say, hey, I'm Travers. I'm the founder of Queerency. I'm the creator of LGBTQ Business Week. I'm the person behind this brand. I want you to know a little bit about me. That works so well. And then like if you're doing video content, introduce yourself in the video. So like if you watch my videos, it's become like a trope at this point that my friend sort of laughs about, but it's like a pattern. I'll start with my introduction, and I'll say like, did you know that the founder of SiriusXM Radio is a trans woman? Her name is Martine Rothblatt, and I can't wait to tell you about her. By the way, I'm Trav. I'm the founder of Queerency. I report on the queer economy. And then I keep going. And when I started doing that, I saw my engagement and my following shoot up, because I realized I was making a human connection with the people. I wasn't just talking about the latest news story. I wasn't just, it wasn't just focused on the topic. They were able to like know, oh, wow, you're Trav. Like you're not just Queerency. You're Trav. You have a name, you have a personality. And that's really important. And then finally, always have a call to action at the end, right? So whether it's a carousel or a video, always end with like, follow me, subscribe, check this out, etc. You don't always have to be selling to people, but you do need some sort of call to action. It could even just be, let me know what you think in the comments, right? That's a call to action as well, because you want people to engage with your work, and you also want them to feel like they are an active participant in whatever you're building, in the platform that you're building. And by providing a call to action, especially asking people to comment or subscribe or whatever, that gives them the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. And we all feel supported by different actions. So if you're creating, again, a post for Etsy, because maybe you're going to have a sale or something, you can say, hey, can y'all do me a small favor? Because we love to help people, right?
Yes.
Can you do me a small favor? Can you share this with someone who you think likes my candles, for example? Because you keep bringing up candles, and I know who you're thinking about every time you say that. But, that's helpful. And just breaking further down what you said, what's so great about that formula that you've created is you're immediately saying what the value is of sticking around.
Yes.
You're you're remembering that because you have those accounts with 2 million and 30,000 followers amplifying your work, people are just seeing you for the first time. And so that's something we can borrow from podcasting is every time, even though I have people listening in and they're already following me on the different platforms for my podcast, I have to always remember that someone could be tuning in for the first time and I don't want to lose them. So
Yep.
I love that you also introduce yourself and make it really clear what you represent, what you're here for, and then bring back the value. And all that happens so quickly, so seamlessly. And
Yeah.
it doesn't bother me as someone who loves your content, you
Okay.
know, like,
That's good to
because,
know. I'm glad.
yeah,
I'm glad. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, because at a certain point I was like, I hope this doesn't become tiring for people. But so I'm happy to hear that at least for you, it's not.
yeah. Yeah. And but that's the thing though, is like you don't want to lose those like new people that could potentially follow you. Do my
Absolutely.
ears maybe turn it out sometimes or tune it out rather sometimes? Maybe, but like I know that you're going to deliver every time when
Mm,
you have your posts.
mm.
So yes, I'm loving this conversation. First off, I just want to say if you haven't popped over to LinkedIn, there's just been a wonderful conversation happening there. So really happy to see that. Someone was just saying like yes to the block button. So revisiting that
Block,
conversation when
block,
you've got
block, block.
trolls, don't
Yeah.
even waste your time.
Don't waste your time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like trying to see. Cool. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so we'll start to wrap this up. But another question I'm seeing is how do you establish yourself as an expert with a skill worthy of inquiring
Mm,
about, like showcasing your value? I think like I would love to just quickly chime in and say something that's been helpful for me as an entrepreneur is separating myself from my work because I don't want to get caught in something where I'm like, oh, no one's liking my content, I'm crap or something. I'm removing myself from the work in just a way, not so that I'm so disconnected that I'm not passionate about it and putting my all into it, whatever that looks like, but not letting it critique me as a human. And
mm,
then I think the second part of it, and something that you've mentioned previously, is just like, what is the value? What is the problem you're solving for someone? Because someone desperately needs to hear that and needs you. So coming back to the question again, how do you establish yourself as an expert with a skill worthy of inquiring about and showcasing your value?
ugh. I think that, I mean, there's so many ways to do that. I think, you know, one of the ways I'll just talk about like with me, right? Like with the content that I produce on Instagram and TikTok, um, I always try to make sure that it's like well researched, well delivered. I even like include sources and stuff at the end of my videos. Um, and then on certain videos, I'll even sort of like include sort of like a credibility line, sort of like, so I did this video this past week, sort of analyzing a TikTok video by TikTok CEO. And at the beginning of that, I said, hey, I'm Trav. I'm a Forbes contributor and the founder of Queerency. And I did it in that video because I knew that that video was going to reach people outside of the normal Queerency audience. And they would want to know who the hell is this person and why are they able to, why should I listen to them, right? And so regardless of whether what they think about Forbes, regardless of whether or not they even know what Queerency is, that sort of providing your credentials, that credentialing sort of, I think it has like a cognitive effect that like, okay, well, I'll listen a little longer, right? As opposed to me just getting up there and just talking. So I think that's one strategy that you could use, that I use. But I think that like there, you know, there's a much larger answer to this too, is just like showing your work, right? Like um some of the accounts and creators that I follow that, you know, I trust almost immediately everything that they say is because over time I've seen their work and that it's quality and that they take care in the production of the things that they're doing and that they may not take themselves too seriously, but they take their work seriously. And they may have a mistake or they may not be perfect, but they're always going to do their best. And so I think that's another way, is to just like have, credibility is not built overnight. It's like a long game. And as long as you are like doing your best every time, and your best may differ with every post, with every piece of content on any specific day. As long as you're doing your best, people will be able to see that, and they'll be happy to, be along for the journey of your growth, and they'll over time learn to trust what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think two quick tips I have for that, as I was listening to you as well, is whether you're offering a product or a service, answer a very specific question for folks, because that's a really great content strategy. So I think about, okay, I had a call with a parent. I'm not going to share any identifying information, but maybe that parent asked me, what do I do if I make a mistake with pronouns? Well, I can create a little post about that. And there's a lot to be said there. But if I focus on like just one point I want to make, which is self-correct yourself and keep going, when you hear yourself making that mistake, and why, and the value I'm offering is because, well, you're showing, you're role modeling for others what to do. And you're also helping to show that like you caught the mistake, and you're doing that work to keep practicing and self-correcting. And then the other thing I want to share that may be helpful for folks is, Answer the Public is one of my new favorite tools, because what you can do is you can put in a few different terms in there, and what they're going to show you is what people are searching for right now with those terms. And that can also help you generate questions if you're not getting any, for example. So like for, going back to the candles, if it's candles and safety, right? Maybe that's what you're looking up. Like, is it safe to have soy candles? Like, why are those the best? Why are soy candles the best? I don't know if they are. I'm just saying, but if you're answering those hyper specific questions like that, you're showing value, and you're also not necessarily giving away everything. But it's also okay even if you did, because again, people are going to see that value. They're going to have other questions, but this is a good way, again, to see what people are looking up. So even if I put, hands soft or something, if people are doing tips and tricks at home, like what are some tips and tricks for making sure my hands are, not super dry, whatever that is, or if there's a certain product, whatever. But it helps give you some really good information. And again, that's whether you have a product or a service that you're offering.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, we've come a long way. We've stayed quite longer than we intended to. So I am going to protect both of our times and wrap things up here. But I just wanted to say, for folks, if you haven't already, please follow Travers on LGBTQ Business Week and Queerency on both Instagram and TikTok if you happen to hang around there. I've shared this a few times. I've also shared to make sure to sign up for Travers newsletter for LGBTQ Business Week. LGBTQ Business Week is November 1st through 7th. The first one was last year. Really awesome to see. So we'll have the second one this year. Not mine, it's Travers. I'm not trying to co-opt it. So he's going to have his second year for that this year. Do you want to like quickly tell folks what LGBTQ Business Week is about?
Yeah, and I actually beg to differ. It is yours as well. Yeah.
Oh,
like
okay. Well, I see what you're doing.
Yeah, but you were one of the first businesses to join on to participate in it. And so like this was never, I don't want Business Week to be a me thing. I just want, someone had to get it started, and it was me, right? And so but yeah, so the LGBTQ plus Business Week, the idea for it started last fall when I saw this uptick in harassment against queer-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. And I was trying to figure out a way to show support, but also to raise awareness leading up to the Black Friday holiday shopping season. And so I reached out to people like Chris Angel and about 24 other queer-owned businesses and brands and said, hey, I have this idea. Can you participate? Can you support? we launched it and it went well. And so the first annual one will be November 1st to the 7th, 2023. We'll be doing lots of content leading up to that, but it's just going to be another opportunity to really raise awareness for our businesses, for our entrepreneurs, and also for some of the economic issues that LGBTQ plus people face. And yeah, I would love to, if you're interested in participating, feel free to sign up for the newsletter on the website.
Yeah, and you're also available for consultation. So we have the link below. Who are ideal candidates for you? As far I know, we heard like maybe not for platforms like LinkedIn, but what kind of problems can you help folks with when consulting about social media?
Yeah, sure. So primarily people who are looking for strategies or just feedback on ideas that they have for growing their brands on Instagram or TikTok, and also just sort of have questions about what's worked for me and stuff like that. And so I'm happy to chat with you to like ideate, on how what you can do to share the things that I've done that I didn't get to talk about in this webinar. And then just like figure out a plan to help you be successful on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, and then I know two other things is we wanted to highlight that there's also great resources out there for us, especially those of us who are queer, trans, LGBTQ plus, etc. So there's the Queer Business Alliance, which is a really great resource. They have mentoring, they also have programs and stuff they do, and there's also Everywhere is Queer. And what's great about Everywhere is Queer is, again, if you're an LGBTQ plus owned business, no matter how big or small you are, whether you're just online or you also have a physical presence, it is a free directory for you to promote your work. And it's just been really beautiful to see that resource grow for I think since early 2021 is when it started. So just wanted to offer those as resources for folks too, to make sure that your work is getting out there. Anything else you want to say as we sign off, Travers?
No, thank you again for partnering with me on this. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait until the next one. And thank you all for showing up and for being here, whether you're here live or watching the playback. It's an honor to like be able to chat with you about this. And if there's any way that I can help you and your business, don't hesitate to reach out.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again, folks. Again, super appreciate the chat that was happening in LinkedIn and the folks that also participated on YouTube. So thanks again for being here, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime. Bye, everyone.